this is the Chittanupasana, or the contemplation of mind. So this contemplation of the mind, this Chittanupasana, is the third tretra in the Anapanasati Sutta. And in this third tretra, so there are again 8 principles are there. So 4 pairs there. So Chitta Padisangvedi Asasisamiti Sikati, Chitta Padisangvedi Pasasisamiti Sikati, like that. Abhipamodayang, Samadahang, and Vimochayang. So 4 pairs of this tretra, focusing on the mental state. And this within this, the first principle or Chitta Padisangvedi is which number? You remember? That's the 9th number in the Anapanasati. Okay? Number 9 in Anapanasati, and the first in the Chittanupasana, the contemplation of the mind. So this is also quite important to remember which state we are in, and which tretra we are talking about it. Now here, when we talk about the mind, the Chitta Padisangvedi, we have spent a lot of time how the mind generates or creates, and a basic basic understanding that if you remember, okay, do you remember? How mind creates. So let's say the number 8. Pasang bhayang chitta sankharang pasasisamiti sikati. That's the calming, actually before that. So that's a chitta sankhara patisangvedi. How the mind creates. Do you remember? It seems like it's forgotten somewhere. Okay. Anyway, so basically, how the mind, the Chitta Sankhara, the mind creates in the 2 functions, right? The one is the feeling, and another one is the perception. The combination of these feelings and the perceptions, one mind comes. And then later, in the 7th and 8th, we discussed on how this Vedana and the Sanya, or the feeling and the perceptions, calms down. And when these 2 calms down, then we become aware of this luminous mind, brightness of this mind, the pure mind. Okay? And this pure mind, now before we go into that, again, although we have understood that the moment when we come across with the feeling, that we are not putting the perception in there, and that the feeling becomes defunct, and the mind becomes complete in a luminosity. Yet we have to remember that we cannot free or away from the feeling. There must be a feeling always. Without that, there is no mind. Remember, without an object, there is no mind. So without an object, there is no mind. And on this basis of without the object, there is no mind, so we always have to rely on the feeling. On that feeling. So that's why, in order to understand the nature of this luminosity of luminous mind or the clear mind, we have to go back to study the Satipatthana now. So in the Satipatthana, the Dhammanupasana, Satipatthana, who remembers? What are the Dhammanupasana in Satipatthana? What are they? You remember? In Dhammanupasana? in Satipatthana also, the bodily contemplation, feeling, contemplation on feeling, contemplation on mental state, and then the fourth one is the Dhammanupassana, the phenomena. So we have to remember that as well. In the Dhammanupassana, first starts off with the 5 hindrances. Right? 5 hindrances, 5 aggregates, 6 sense base, 7 factors of enlightenment, and 4 noble truth. So that's the Dhammanupassana. We have to remember on that. And now, this is translated as the mind object. Yeah? The Dhammanupassana is mind object. And here, in order to understand this clear mind, or this single mind, I mentioned last week about the 16 different types or different states of the mind. Yeah? So, there is mental state. Yeah? 16 mental state of the mind. One thing. Okay? And another one is mental objects. Okay? So there is another one, mental objects. So called a Dhammaram. Yeah? Dhammaromana. Yeah? That's the object of the mind. So Dhammaram. And then there is mind base. Okay? So that mind base is coming from the 6 sense base. Okay? So these 3 are different. Okay? So these 3 are working together.
Can you do the Pali words as well if you can? Like, if you
So in the Chittanupassana, the Chitta.
Okay.
Chitta is a mind.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And then that's the mental state.
Okay.
So that's the mental state, Chitta. And then in the object, so Dhammaramana. Okay? And then it comes to the 6 sense basis, that is the Chitta. Okay? So another Chitta, a consciousness. And now here, when this mind comes to contact with the object, again there is another consciousness, another Chitta arises. Without that, then there won't be anything else. See? Now, to see that, if I say, I seize the object, there need consciousness. Yeah? I seize the object. In order to see the object, you have to have the consciousness, the Chitta there. And that's also known as a Vijnana. Yeah? Without the Vijnana, you can't see that object. So that is also Chitta as well, Vijnana, but in a different form. And that is attention. Yeah? The conscious awareness. That is the conscious awareness. And so, when the mind sees the object, so the object is a base. Right? So this object, and when this mind when mind sees this object, the moment when we are not conscious of this mind, then that creates the mental state. You see now? So mind first was a base in the 6 sense bases. Yeah? So there are 6 sense base. Eye, ear, nose, and what else? Eye, ear, nose, and tongue and body and man, or a Chitta. So this Chitta is a base. And when this Chitta comes to contact, and that contact is the mind object, phenomena, the mind object. And when we talk about the mind object, so we have to go back to see the mental, in the Satipatthana, the Dhammanupassana. So it starts from the 5 hindrances. So that's the mind object. The first object is kama chanda. Yeah? So when we have a sensual desire, at that moment, what happens? Our mind, rather than being just a luminous, clear mind, we are dyeing this mind into something else. And that something else becomes the mental state, the chitta. So that's why this mind becomes lustful or hateful or ignorant or delusional. See? So that's why the mental state, in order to see this mental state or the mind state, we have to see the connection, how this becomes. So that's for Vedana, the feeling, we cannot go away from it. So in the practice of a meditation, that's what we are doing is, when we have feeling arises, at that moment, what sort of a mental objects that we are employing or having it, and having that mental object, what sort of a reaction is coming. And that reaction transforms mind into different states. And the different states of the mental state are 16 mental states. And the 16 mental states are clearly defined or explained in the Satipatthana. Okay? In Satipatthana, these 16 stages. So, in the practice, that's what we are doing. Suppose our mind sees the object of a mental object. When the mind base comes to contact with the mental object, let's say kama chanda, the sensual desire, and that pollutes our mind into different colors. Right? So dyeing, like a dyeing. The Buddha used the word dyeing the mind. It's like our cloth is so pure, so bright, and we're dyeing with the different colors. So different colors here. There are mostly three. That's greed, hatred, and delusion, or non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. So we're dying in that way. Right? And this cloth becomes that, whether the greed, hatred, or anger, or the delusional mental state. Right? So that's the first thing. The second one, what is the second hindrance? Vyapada. What's the English translation?
Anger, hatred.
So anger or hatred. And that's again, mind, when gets this mental object, this anger, the vyapada, what happens? It boils the mind. It boils the mind. And this is also Buddha used the simile, the boiling of the mind. And this boiling of the mind, basically, what sort of a mental state we are having? Anger. Okay? See, you see the relationship, there's three things. Feeling arises, with the feeling, consciously paying attention to that, and because of that, these forms comes. Now, in the practice, what we are doing is recognizing this mind. This works so fast, and it needs to stop there. The moment when it comes to contact with the object, stopping there. So when we stop there, that's why there is it's called a sammapadana, 4 sammapadanas. So the efforts, the 4 efforts. When we see when our mind, the base comes to contact with this mind object, if our attention or the awareness is sharp enough, we will be able to stop there before it becomes the mental states. And as a result of that, the moment when we see that this mind in that stage, what we are doing is, if that's a negative, remove it. If that's a already persistent negativity in our mind, realizing that, remove it, completely uprooting it from our consciousness, and then after that, putting effort to cultivate the wholesome and maintaining the wholesome there. Right? So that's how this goes into in that form. Now, this is how you see that this mind, in order to see this mental state, which is very gross, we normally see it. That, okay, I feel greedy, I feel I want it, and I feel I don't like it, I feel I like it, like that. So these all actually coming from the six senses, coming to contact with the object, and then there is if the pleasant sensation, then there is a likeness, called kama tanha and bhava tanha. So sensual pleasure, as well as the desire to be comes in. But if that's a negative, what's happened? Unpleasant sensation, then there is a vibhava tanha, not want to be. And that it becomes the craving. And with that craving, we go into the spiral of creation further on. Whereas the practice of a meditation, what we are doing is to understand this mental state from the gross level, and then gradually going into how this creates. So that's why in the Satipatthana practice, it says, first knowing I have these mental states. I have these, or whatever mental state you have, you know it. And then after knowing that mental state, not only satisfied that I have these, but also linking with others. And this linking with others is so important, and which normally comes once you have fully understood that you have it. And then this compassionate heart develops within you towards other people, towards other beings. And then with that, what you are developing is a compassionate heart towards them, wishing them that which they also able to understand and are free from it. That sort of a mindset will develop in your heart. In your heart. So that happens, and then now this compassionate heart, easy to develop towards others, but it's not easy to develop for us. So that's why in Satipatthana, Buddha clearly said the third stage is to develop that in both. Understanding in both ways. And after that, so the further practice is to understand that how this, let's say the desire, this lustful desire, alright, how this lustful desire arose, right? How this lustful desire arose. So you have to recognize this arising of this lustful mental state in a Satipatthana. Practice is that. And meanwhile, in a similar way, the hatred or the anger or the resentment, also able to recognize in that way, right? How this resentment arises. And then a delusional state also, able to recognize that. When we recognize in that way, then gradually, analytically, we will be able to, what's called bhavanamaya panya, that's from inside, we able to discern that this lustful mental state is in fact developed from these contacts and these mental objects. If there is no mental object, right, and if this mind does not come to contact with this mental object, what happens? Then there won't be mental state. Yeah? So there won't be that mental state exist there. And so that's how the entire, this 16 stages or 16 mental states becomes neutralized. And that's how in the practice, that's why it's like seeing this mind seeing this mind. And that is, you become like a radar watching from the top and watching how these activities are taking place. And that's the reason why we able to overcome these 5 hindrances in that way. And suppose that's a sloth and a torpor. The mind comes to the state of this mind becomes contact. Mind comes to contact with the sloth and torpor. And that's Buddha used the algae. Algae in the pond, covering the pond, so you cannot see. And with that cannot seeing, that's how you're going into the delusional state, the delusional state of the mind. Whereas if our awareness is so sharp enough, and we see this mind itself. So this mind that says that the mind is seeing the mind, the first mind is actually just the awareness, the conscious awareness state of this mind. And that is seeing the real mind, who is the mental states are. And that's how the whole 5 hindrances will reduce or removed by recognizing the mental reaction or connection with these mental factors. The reason we cannot deal with it because we haven't seen the process, but we're still dealing with the mental state. We're still dealing with the mental state. And that's the reason we cannot go further. And sometimes practitioners mostly, rather than dealing with the mental states, happy to be quiet and observed in we call it a sinking in into the samadhi, and do not want to do the chanting, do not want to talk to anybody else, or do not want to read, or do not want to do beyond this sinking into the samadhis. And that's a danger. And that doesn't give us a wisdom. In fact, the practice of a meditation is not to sinking in, but to generate the wisdom, to understand the impermanence of it. Impermanence of even this mind itself. See, here you can see why this mind is impermanent, right? So it's a voidness here, emptiness is here. And once we have understood that, then the wisdom is coming, wisdom is developing. But if you haven't developed your wisdom, you're just simply happy, sinking into your samadhi, just the quiet and so blissful, and so there's like a no pain, and the mind is so calm, so relaxed. I don't need to bother anybody, I don't need to worry anything, I don't need to do any chanting, I don't need to read the books now. Then I don't want to associate with anybody, I just want to be myself into this meditative state. Then,
is that vibhavatanha?
Sorry?
Is that the vibhavatanha?
It could be bhavatanha too. You want to be in there. It could be vibhavatanha, in a sense, the worldly sense. You don't want to associate with other people. And that's the reason sometimes that state of the attainment, I am liberated. Sorry.
So can you please explain vibhavatanha?
I don't want to be. You don't want to associate. You don't want to do this and you don't want to do that. But in a deeper sense, non-existent, like that.
What's
There is a
non-existence?
there is a simile, or there was a one, not a simile, but a real story. There was a nun who was meditating and then went into such a state, so calmness and sinking in, and she thought that she was liberated. She couldn't see any greed. She couldn't see any hatred. She was just in a bright, luminous state. And as soon as this things arises, she was able to be mindful of that, and then she becomes so joyous and happy. And then, oh, I must go and tell my teacher that I am enlightened. And so she goes out and goes to the teacher and say, "Oh, Achan, I think I have understood and I'm enlightened." Then this Achan said in Thai called Tole, which is like in English, bullshit. And then this nun said, "Oh, I'm here to tell you that I'm enlightened. Why you're saying a bullshit?" So she became angry. And then the teacher said, "That's what I said." Like that. So so that's why the practice of a meditation, what we have to understand, that it's not about sinking in and disassociation with other people, but it's become a lively. There is a wisdom to live by. That's why I use a simile of our mind transformed into the water type. Any jar you can pour in, but unattached, untainted, but maintaining the pristine purity of its nature, the water. And whichever jar you pour in, it's okay. And in the meantime, you can go to any jars. So that's the mind you have to develop. So that you are able to adjust in any situation and not affect it. So there is Buddha gave a simile. It's like a dew on a leaf. A dew on a leaf. The dew is there, but not attached to it. So our mind is, like we are living on this earth, in this world, but not affected by this world. So that is the state. So when we practice meditation, we have to develop this mindset in that state, so that all the 16 mental states will not be affected. That just simply become, okay, it arises, okay, that's gone. And in fact, if your awareness is strong enough, that doesn't arise. We are not enlightened yet, so it is quite obvious that these will come. But at least you can notice as soon as it arises, and you recognize, I'm having this lustful desire. So you recognize that and you pay attention to that, and you go back, seeing, okay, this lustful desire arose because of this mental state. Okay? And because of this mental state. And now I'm aware of that. I am conscious of it. So able to connect, pay this attention to that state. When we manage to pay attention to that state, then it's just like a heart becomes just a void. It's just like it opens like a vast sky. So everything is just absorbed there, but not affected. It's just like vast. Okay? And if I explain it into the jhanic way, then that becomes akasananjayatana state. That's the state you come to be, in that state. Yeah? So, I think I will end here. The main point is to remember, before we were talking about the mind arises with the combination of the feeling and the perception. And then when we calm this feeling and a perception down, then that also calms the mind down. Right? And when this mind completely calms, and you become a very equanimous and what's called a one-pointedness of this mind, and a very disconnected and equanimous, and that's how this mind becomes pure and clear. Okay, and now this pure and a clear mind, we are not liberated, so that it's always tainted by something else, colored by something else. As soon as we come to contact with different things, so that's why there is the mind base, mind object, and mental states. Right? So based on this mind base, the moment when it comes to contact with the mind object, then that's how we will get the mental state. And most of the time, we're dealing with the mental state. Whereas, if you become a good meditator, then you will be dealing with the mind base and a mind object. And you will be dealing with, these are actually impermanent, not beautiful, and it is bringing a suffering, and that doesn't last long. It's not me, that's not me, I am not that. So there's no soul. It's just that is.
Is that the stage that you can see the mind watching mind, like
yes.
mind watching the object? And
okay. So that's you have to come back. See, coming back into. So first, we are watching the mind, watching the mental state, lustful, hatred, anger, and those things. But once we go into deeper, then we will be able to see that why I'm having these mental states, and that's the cause is the mental objects there. And now when we look at the mental objects, how these let's call it steers up, then that also become a defense. It won't react anymore now. It just become it won't be exist there. And that's the reason why we have to, in that moment, when these 5 hindrances settles, and it is not affecting our mind, and that's the moment when the mind is watching the mind. Okay? And that's how, when your mind is watching the mind, or mind is seeing the mind, then you're coming to observe the 5 aggregates now. Okay? And when you come to observe the 5 aggregate, before that again, they're dealing with 5 hindrances, actually the negative one. So when these, suppose the moment when you have a sensual pleasure comes, at that time, how to deal with that? Rather than let it to dye our mind into a different colors, we stop there and transforming it into the positive mind, positive mindsets. So that's, we have to employ another dhammas, another positive qualities to counterpart that. So that's how then we gradually coming into. And once we have seen this mind as a mind seeing the mind, then we come that after that able to come to pay attention to this 5 aggregates. That's why it's coming into the Dhammanupassana in Satipatthana. But here in Anapanasati, at this stage, coming all at the same time. So the Dhammanupassana in Anapanasati is not correlate in a Satipatthana. In Dhammanupassana here in Anapanasati is talking about the impermanence. And that impermanence is only possible when you have fully gone into investigate and understand the true nature of this mind. When you know and when you understand this true nature of mind, then you understand that how this mind flickering moment changes one after another, one after another, one after another. If you remember, I have gave this simile of turning the pages of the book. The mind is turning the pages of the book like that. And then each turning, you will be able to notice, why am I turning? What is in there? So that's simply understand the objects, mind objects.
Amazing.
Okay, so that's why it's we have to remember that the practice of a meditation is not about getting into samadhi. It's about developing the wisdom. And when you develop the wisdom, nothing makes you miserable, nothing makes you different. You become simply, naturally, it is. Alright? So, with this, any question? Otherwise, we practice a loving kindness meditation to finish.